another thing you said in the past was we have free will because the mind, the great mind, has given us mind separate from his mind or its mind, their mind.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
What should I use to refer to your God?
Just say chaos. Just the great
Well,
chaos,
I mean,
or
like
just the great mind.
What are your God's pronouns?
Yeah, because it has a penis or a vagina. No.
Well, I mean, it could be gendered. It could be they or
No,
it.
it was gender. Look, when we talk about gender in my worldview, we're talking about sex.
Okay. So it would be they.
That would be the Christian. The Christian has both male and female God. No, there is no sex to the God that I'm talking about because it doesn't have a body. It is purely mind.
Okay. Well, so what? Okay.
That goes against your Bible.
Yeah, I'm not a Bible thumper. If you want to talk about a God that is she, they, them, that would be the Christian God, because Jesus is a male who has testicles between his legs, and the Holy Spirit is referred to as it's using a female pronoun, ruach. Ruach is a female pronoun, so it's she, they, them in Christianity, not my God.
Okay.
But in one of our conversations, you were saying that you saw a contradiction between free will and simulation theory. Do you still hold to that?
Well, I've gone back and looked at like all of our conversations, and I get where you're coming from. The free will comes from the minds that are outside of the simulation.
Outside the simulation? What do you mean?
They're external from the simulation. They're not part of it.
But no, we're in the simulation. We're just not of the simulation.
Okay.
There's a difference.
Explain.
So, for example, if I were to be of the simulation, that would mean like all my thinking would be just a product of the code that came before it. The setup. But if I'm in the simulation, that would be akin to me just being like a virtual player playing an avatar in the game.
Right. Okay. So when I
Is
say
this a determinism versus free will argument?
In a way, yes.
So when I say you're outside the simulation, I don't mean that you're not like interacting with the simulation. I mean that the consciousness is not part of what's being simulated. It's something else.
Yes, it's not being simulated. I mean, do you still hold to that? Because in our conversations, you kind of leaning that way.
No, I'm with you. I see where you're coming from.
Okay, because you were holding to the whole like consciousness is of the brain, and if the brain is being simulated,
no, I was not. I was.
You were.
I wasn't. I was going with substance dualism. You just didn't listen to me, but I was still thinking that the spirits that are being incarnated into bodies are still part of the simulation, even though they're not part of coming from the physical simulation of the brain. When I realized that and actually, I tried to get you to read that thing that I said. That's what the thing that you weren't interested in reading said. And I was like, is this what you're looking at? And you're like, I'm not reading that. That's what I was trying to get to. But anyway, all right. So our consciousness is a part of God's mind that he's like separated.
It's not part of God's mind. You can say it comes from God's mind.
Okay. Well, at one point you told me that it was separate from God's mind, but still inside of God. But God is only mind, so it still have to be inside of God's mind, right?
You can think of I think the closest analogy I can give you would be like, let's say God is the ocean, and we are bubbles in the ocean, and these little bubbles are the individuals. These are our souls. This is the true us, the true me.
That's how I was looking at it, like we're a bubble inside of God.
Yeah, but you're not exactly like a different substance. You're more like a modality.
Yeah. Okay. And so because we're separate from or we're not, I don't know how to say it, but our mind is separated from God's mind, but we're inside of God. So we're still part of God.
Well, it's not that you're a part of God. It's that you're just like you manifest from God. You're manifested by God through His will. He has like created this bubble, basically, birthed this bubble. You want to say?
Mm-hmm. Where did the bubble come from?
Comes from God.
Okay, so
from the ocean.
So before God created the bubble, was what is inside the bubble part of God then?
The bubble, well, the bubble is nothing. It's just an expansion.
Okay, but inside of that bubble is my consciousness, right?
No, because it's not you. You're only you when the bubble appears.
Okay. So where did the bubble come from, though? Like
it came from God. It comes from the ocean. So you can say it's a piece of mind. You could say.
Okay, so it's a piece of it's like God takes a piece of His mind and sections it off, and that becomes our mind.
Well, this is the closest thing I can come to like a physical analogy.
Sure.
Just to use water, because it's not physical.
Okay. So so where does it come? But like, does God just conjure it out of nowhere? Does it the mind come from?
Well, you're talking about the process. If I know the specific process that God uses,
or just some kind of like explanation of where it comes from.
Well, we understand there is a process. For example, like bubbles in the water, there's a process for that. But for me to know what process God does to like generate this soul, I have no idea. But we understand that there is a process.
Okay. And so, well, okay, maybe this before the bubble is created, is the stuff that becomes the bubble, is that somewhere else?
The stuff. That's the thing. You keep referring to the mind if it's like a thing. You're taking this analogy to like make it more and more physical. Like when I'm trying to like use something that is less physical to draw you more into the non-physical. For example, let's say let's think. For example, you yourself think you're in a party right now. Okay. Now try to make some other people in your party. Let's call her Samantha. Now Samantha, the simulation that you're currently carrying out in your brain right now, your mind, not your brain, your mind, is this simulation. Her actions are not of her free will. There's something of your simulation. But in God, He's not doing this. See, so He's manifesting all the physical objects and even the body, but He's not like dictating the mind of Samantha in the same way you are dictating the mind of Samantha.
Okay. Okay, so it's kind of like an autonomous dream.
Well, we are like within the dream of God.
Right, but it's an autonomous dream. Like he doesn't control the dream.
He does. He does. He controls the universe. He controls what gets.
What I mean is, he doesn't control the agents in the dream. That's what.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
He doesn't control the will of the agents.
Okay. Okay. So, how is it different from a dream? Because like when I dream, even though like I don't really have a lot of control over my dreams, but it is all coming from my mind.
Well, it's coming from like
obviously that analogy is going to break down if we truly do have free will.
Well, in your dreams, it comes from your dreams comes from your like subconscious. You know, whatever is happening in your daily life, you're just gonna imprint that into your dreams.
Right. So where does God's dream come from?
It comes from. It's not coming from anywhere. He's just making it.
So he can
Just
he
like-
can
Yeah, well, he's willfully making this.
so he can
So, yeah, because we can think of an apple, right? But we can't hold the thought of an apple for more than 1 second. Like you can be thinking of an apple right now, but it's like some sort of foggy, distorted vision of an apple. You can't even think of the DNA of the apple. But God is able clearly to manifest the vision of the apple and the DNA within the apple, and this applies to the whole universe. So we are talking about a mind who's able to think, control. He's the perfect mind. He's the most powerful mind.